Issues that became crises. 40 minutes into the weekly team meeting, the same issue comes up again. It was on the agenda last week, and the week before. Everyone agrees it is a problem. Everyone has a view on what should be done. Nobody agrees whose job it is to actually do it. The meeting ends. The issue goes back on next week's agenda, and the project absorbs another week of delay it did not budget for. Here is what happens without a formal issues process. The problem gets raised. People nod. It goes on the agenda for next week. The discussion repeats. Nobody feels authorized to make the decision that would close it. Nobody escalates it to someone who does. And while the issue circles through meeting after meeting, the project pays for it in delayed decisions, blocked work streams, and a team that is spending energy on discussion rather than delivery. The pattern holds across every type of project. On a large ERP migration, a data quality issue was raised in week 4 and discussed in 7 consecutive meetings. By the time it was resolved, 2 work streams had lost 3 weeks they could not recover. On a financial services transformation, a stakeholder conflict was raised informally twice and never entered a formal process. It became a stage 3 escalation, with relationship damage that had been building for months. On a public sector facilities program, a contractor performance issue circulated for 6 weeks, while the contract clause that would have closed it sat unused because nobody felt authorized to invoke it. In every case, the root cause is the same. Issues were in verbal circulation, but not in a managed process. There was no formal mechanism to capture them, assign them, and drive them to resolution. No escalation path for the ones the project manager could not close alone. That absence of structure is exactly what the PRINCE2 Issues practice is designed to fill, not with bureaucracy, but with a clear decision pathway from problem to resolution. 3 things make this pattern so persistent. First, issues get treated like risk, with the same slow cadence and the same tolerance for staying open. But an issue has already happened. It needs a faster response. Second, the issue log feels like a complaint form. Raising something formally feels like making an accusation, so problems stay informal and unmanaged. Third, nobody owns the issue. It gets discussed, it gets acknowledged, and it gets left for next week because the meeting ended before anyone said the words, "I will own this." So what does the issues practice actually mean on a real project? It is not a spreadsheet with open and closed columns. It is a decision pathway. A problem enters the process the moment it is identified. It gets a named owner, it gets a resolution timeframe, and if the owner cannot close it within tolerance, there is a clear escalation route to someone who can. The moment an issue is raised, 3 things need to happen. It needs an owner, someone with the authority and capacity to drive it to resolution. It needs a resolution path. What needs to happen, in what sequence, for this to be closed, and it needs a deadline, a date by which it will be resolved or escalated. Without those 3 things, the issue is not being managed. It is being discussed. And discussion without ownership is just a more organized form of doing nothing. The issues practice needs to do 3 things in practice. First, capture issues formally and immediately, not after the 3rd meeting where they have been discussed. Early capture is the difference between a managed problem and a growing one. Second, every issue needs an owner with genuine authority to act, not just a name in a cell. Third, define the escalation threshold up front. Issues the project manager cannot close with intolerance are not theirs to hold. They belong at project board level. The most common mistake is treating the issue log as a record rather than a management tool. Issues get added after meetings as a documentation exercise. Nobody reviews the log between meetings to check whether anything has moved. And the issues that needed a decision in week 1 are still sitting open in week 4, now with 3 other work streams waiting on them. Issue management breaks down in 3 specific ways. Issues and risks get managed together, but an issue that has already materialized needs a faster response than a risk that might. Treating them the same way creates a pace problem. The issue log becomes a record rather than a decision tool, growing longer but not more useful, with nobody actively driving entries toward closure. And workarounds take the place of resolutions, the issue stays open, the workaround becomes permanent, and the underlying problem is never actually fixed. On the ERP migration, the team introduced one change to how issues were managed. Every team meeting opened with a 5-minute issue triage. Every open issue was reviewed for 3 things: who owns it, has it moved since last week, and what happens next. That structure, applied consistently, reduced average issue resolution time from 19 days to 6. The issues did not get easier. The process around them got faster. Early triage is the most effective issue management intervention available. 3 questions applied to every open issue at every team touchpoint. Is this owned? Is this moving? Does this need to go higher? When those questions are asked consistently, issues that are stalling become visible immediately. Escalations happen before damage accumulates, and the team develops a discipline of resolving issues rather than discussing them. 3 steps that make issue management work in practice. First, add a 5-minute issue triage to every team meeting. Owner, progress, next action. Any issue that has not moved since last week needs a decision, not another agenda slot. Second, separate the issue log from the risk register. Different pace, different ownership, different urgency. Third, define resolution timeframes by category before delivery begins. When the threshold is clear, escalation stops feeling like a failure and starts feeling like the process working. On the facilities program, the contractor performance issue that nobody formally owned for 6 weeks eventually forced a contract variation. The legal and commercial cost of that variation was 3 times what structured early intervention would have been, and the 8 weeks added to the program timeline to accommodate the contractor's revised schedule meant the project missed a politically visible public milestone it had been built around. Unmanaged issues create 3 compounding costs. Delay multiplication. An issue blocking one team in week 1 blocks 3 by week 4. The longer it stays open, the more of the project it pulls into its orbit. Workaround debt. The informal fixes that fill the gap around an unresolved issue become permanent fixtures that the project and the business carry long after delivery ends. And escalation shock. When a project board first hears about an issue that has been circulating for 6 weeks, they are not making a decision. They are managing a crisis. Here is the reframe. Discussing an issue in a meeting is not the same as managing it. Discussion produces awareness. Management produces resolution. The gap between the two is filled by 3 things: a named owner, a deadline, and an escalation path for when the owner cannot close it alone. Without those 3 things, every issue meeting is just a more structured version of the problem staying open. The rule is simple: own it, deadline it, close it. Every issue that enters the log needs an owner with the authority to act, a deadline that makes the resolution tangible, and an escalation path that activates when the owner cannot get there alone. That structure does not slow the project down. It stops the same issue consuming 5 consecutive meetings while the project waits for someone to take responsibility. 3 things you can do this week. First, open the issue log and find every entry that has been opened for more than 2 weeks with no resolution update. Each one represents a conversation the team has been avoiding. Start having it. Second, check that every open issue has a named owner and a deadline. If either is missing, assign them now, before the next meeting, not in it. Third, identify any issue being discussed informally that has never been logged. Log it today. If it feels too sensitive to formalize, that is the most important signal of all. If your current project has issues that have been on the agenda for 3 or more consecutive meetings without moving, this is the week to change that. You do not need a process overhaul to start. Pick the oldest open issue, name an owner, set a deadline, and define what escalation looks like if the deadline is missed. That is the whole practice in one action. 3 ways to go further. First, what is the longest an issue has stayed open on a project you worked on, and what finally closed it? Leave a comment. Your experience is exactly what helps other project managers break the same cycle earlier. Second, the Mimir PRINCE2 practitioner course shows you how to build an issues process that drives decisions, not just records problems. Third, this week, find the oldest open issue on your project, give it a named owner and a deadline, and watch what changes. Share your experience.